Welcome to Exceptional Educators Playbook. I am Chasity Craft, the literacy consultant here at KVEC, and I have with me
Vonda Adams. I'm the math consultant here at KVEC.
The purpose of this podcast is to offer professional learning opportunities to meet the needs of our teachers while giving teachers a platform to share their expertise. Every month, we will highlight a different topic that every educator needs to know. That topic will be broken down into content-specific categories. Week 1 will explain what it looks like in literacy. Week 2 will show how it works in math. Week 3 allows you to look at the topic through the social, emotional, behavioral lens, and week 4 offers modifications and models for the low incidence community. So today we're going to be discussing developing goals and determining accommodations in literacy. So we are very excited to have 2 special guests here today with us. The first one is Regina Brown. She's the Special Education Director of Letcher County Schools, and Brandy Hall, who is a special education teacher in the Letcher County school system. So they're going to be talking with us today where to begin in the process of how to determine what goals you write and develop those goals and to determine those accommodations. They're going to show you some things to consider, and then also how that you can ensure compliance when developing those goals. Okay, so ladies, if you want to just kind of tell us just a little bit about yourselves before we get started.
Brandy, go first.
Okay, like she said, my name is Brandy Hall. I'm a special ed teacher at Whitesburg Middle School in Letcher County. This is my 12th year in teaching special ed. Before I worked here, I worked at a school in the Knox County school system. And I work with kids in 6th through 8th grade with learning and behavioral disabilities. And I also am the parent of a special needs child myself. So.
Oh, thanks.
And I'm Regina, and I have been in this field for 32 years as of this year, and had started my career out in Perry County for a year, but have spent the other 31 here in Letcher County. Taught at the high school until I came to the central office as the resource consultant, and then stepped up to director of special ed, I guess about 9 or 10 years ago. It's been so long, I don't remember how long. But I'm very active in our community and very active in our teachers union, and so a lot of people may know me from KEA or may know me from church.
All right, thank you girls so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. So we'll just kind of get right into the questions. The first one is what I want you guys to talk about is what is the first step in the process of developing goals and determining accommodations?
Well, I think the first step would be identification of a disability, obviously, and then taking the data from those disabilities that you've identified, those weaknesses that you've identified, and developing goals based on those.
I think you need to get like a baseline, look at your different data that you have. Like here we have math, we look at that. We look at their testing data that we have from when they're initially identified. And I just kind of like try to look at what they need, and then kind of based on their age and their grade level, and try to associate it best with that. The skills they need also in comparison to the age and grade level that they're on at that point.
And what I tell all of my staff is you may have a kid that has a weakness in every area. You know, there's 3 areas of reading, there's written expression, there's 2 areas of math, there's all kinds of things that they can have weaknesses in. But that ARC has to decide what they can tackle within one school year. And so they can't bite off more than they can chew. So if I'm weak in every area, then it's not a reasonable expectation for me to work on every single weakness all year long and give it the time that it needs to breach that gap that child may have. And so I have my staff start with a minimal amount of goals. So if I'm weak in all 3 areas of reading, for instance, since we're focusing on literacy, then I would say, you know, if I can't read, comprehension comes after that.
Right.
And so let's start with our basics. Can we improve the fluency? Can we improve the basic reading skills itself? And so that would be where we would start looking at for development of those goals. And what I tell my staff is a reasonable expectation, and this has been determined by, litigation and Supreme Court rulings, we shouldn't be expected to raise a kid's reading level multiple grade levels in one school year. So a reasonable expectation would be to take them from where they're at to one grade level out. So if I'm in first grade and I'm reading at the third grade level, then my first goal should be to get them to second grade reading level. And that's kind of the parameter that we work under for IEP goal development.
I like that. And I like how you said about focusing, because, and that was one of the things for me as a teacher, is because when sometimes you're working with this kid and like you said, they're just weak in everything. And of course you want to help them with everything, but you have to really focus on that, what is, which we'll go into a little bit later, is like those discrete skill, what specific skill is, and just focus on that, because sometimes if it is a basic reading skill issue, then if they got that, then the fluency may come naturally. So
Absolutely.
That was one of the big things that I had to realize as a teacher, because you wanted, it's just, and then like, with the writing, and you hand them a prompt and they sit there for the whole 5 minutes or however long, and like you get nothing. So you're like, oh my gosh. So, and that could be multiple things too. It could, is it that they can't even spell it, or they can't even have that thought process. So you want to make sure. So that is, I think, a really big takeaway on that.
Well, a big expression I like to use, and everybody's heard it before, is I'm a jack of all trades, but I'm a master of none. And so if I tackle all trades at the same time, I'm going to be a master of none.
Right.
And so, and I always use the example of a child that would be FMD. It's obvious they have multiple areas of concern. If I spend every day just working on one of those, how much gain can I make instead of splitting hairs and try to work on 20 of them at the same time?
Right. Yeah, that's a very good example. Yes. So what would be some of the tools and resources that you guys use for literacy? So you talked about, collecting that data and how to determine and working with those kids with the strategy. So just share with us a few things of like tools and resources that you use to do that.
Number one, we have iExcel. I purchased that for our special ed staff to use in all 4 core areas. So they get it for reading, math, science, and social studies all the way through 12th grade. And so that's one tool that they have in their wheelhouse. But Brandy can talk a lot more about tools that she specifically uses in the middle school to help our kids. But definitely any like CDI, Easy CBM, some things like that are programs.
I like Easy CBM too, and then it has the tracking built in with Easy CBM.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and iExcel is the same way, and then that would be for all 4 subjects.
And MobiMax is another good one, and they've upgraded their program now because I've got a salesman trying to pitch, me to buy it. But they've upgraded it to where it does a lot like iExcel, and so there's tons of stuff out there. It's just deciding what you can use.
Yeah, we've started using a program here called EdPuzzle. And what we found with a lot of, especially our kids online, and for me, the majority of my kids are still virtual at this point. And the good thing about it is they weren't watching these videos. I was spending all of this time putting together these videos for them, these Loom videos where I watch them through, and you could see that someone had viewed it, but you didn't know exactly who had viewed it and for how long. If you do EdPuzzle, they can pace it, they can go back, they can rewatch, but they can't skip ahead. So they're having to watch the whole thing,
like
the whole lesson.
Now, is that a purchased program?
No,
it's
no,
free?
it's a totally free program.
Okay, say that again, what it would be, what's it called?
It's called EdPuzzle.
Okay.
And you can just do, and you can link it to even YouTube videos if you find a video on YouTube. And you fix it to where, and they get a grade for it. You can embed questions in it, and it stops the video when they answer the questions, and then you get back a grade for it. So that's
I can't believe that's free.
Yeah.
Yes, that you have
now.
That's good point. Good point. Yes. Get on that before they start charging. EdPuzzle.
EdPuzzle.
Yeah.
What these companies tend to do is give you free for a while, and then they yank the rug out.
Yeah,
We
because-
use it while it's free.
We love it because of the pacing, and see, like, my kids can go back and rewatch it, and then
Yes.
it'll ask the question again. So if they miss it, you know, whatever it's telling them, then they can go back and rewatch it and that sort of thing, and then it shows it, you know, on there also. And
That
you
is
can make
awesome.
EdPuzzles, or you can link it to like YouTube or TeacherTube or whatever it is that you use. So I really like that. We've been using that a lot.
Yeah, that is awesome. Wow. Okay, so we talked about getting your data and what you're using for that. So the next thing would be, how do you determine the appropriate goal and accommodations? And actually, Regina, you all kind of touched on that already, but to make sure, but one of the things here, like to match that skill deficit. So this leads into those accommodations. You know, how do
Okay.
you make that determination?
Well, what we've done in our county for years is we have a file that we've used countywide called ARC Meeting Notes. And I update that every summer. But one of the neat things that we've been able to do in there is to develop a goal and benchmark bank for each grade level through 5th grade in basic reading, reading fluency, reading comp, math calc and math reasoning, written expression, DD, speech. We've got them all in our goal bank. And so we went with the core content guidelines, and we developed our goals and benchmarks from those in each of those areas that we focus on in special ed, so that our teachers didn't have to reinvent the wheel. And it's got all of the format that it needs to be a legal goal and benchmark. So it's A, B, C, D, E, F. I think it's even through F now.
Yeah,
is
they
in
keep
that
adding to
goal.
the alphabet.
Yeah, they keep adding the alphabet to it, but it's got the whole alphabet in it, so it meets the requirements for audit. It's legal, and it also meets that child's needs. And then even with that, our teachers have the ability to choose, you know, do I want to work on this comprehension goal this year, or do I want to work on this comprehension goal at this grade level? So they have that ability to choose as many benchmarks as they think they can accomplish, you know, one to whatever, or different goals in that same area. And so we worked hard on it, and we update it annually so that it's up to date where it needs to be and stays within those core content guidelines. But I think our staff likes it and our staff uses it because it cuts down on their planning time.
Right. And listen, you mentioned, let's go back to that alphabet just to clarify in case that there may be some people that don't know. So like Regina said, the A, B, C, D, E, and F, that's another kind of a mnemonic strategy that we use here in special education. And
You want me to spell your soup for you?
So your A will be your audience. So that's going to be who it is, who the goal is, name the child's name. The behavior is what action, it's got to be measurable. Then the C is the circumstances. So like what the condition, like given in a small group setting or something like that. Your degree and criteria is how well. So is that going to be 80% accuracy or whatever?
3 out of 5 trials.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. The evaluation tool, and I think that's one too. I think that sometimes it gets a little bit tricky that we don't realize we need to kind of stick in that goal as well, is you need to put in there how you're going to measure that. So it could be like a like teacher probe or something. So that's your evaluation. And then the F is the frequency, is how often are you going to measure that? So for every goal, that's a quick way to check to make sure that that's one of those things that kind of ensures that compliance piece, is making sure that all those are in there. So just wanted to touch on that.
What makes you focus on how often you've got to collect that data and what you have to use to collect that data, keeping in mind that you don't change in midstream. So if you say you're going to measure it weekly, you don't all of a sudden start measuring it monthly, because the goal says you measure it weekly, you measure it weekly. Mm-hmm. So you can't just change in the middle of what you're doing. You have to kind of stay consistent so that you're doing it with fidelity.
Mm-hmm. That's a good, and I like that too. So it's not just, I mean, that IEP is written for that child, but just like you said, Regina, it keeps you focused. It's a guideline
Right.
for you too, and so that definitely helps. I mean, just to have that in writing like that.
And with the new goal monitoring tool that's in Infinite Campus,
Oh, it's so nice.
it's, oh man, it's amazing. It does your
Wonderful.
graphing for you. Everything.
If you want to kind of just touch on that a little bit and tell us a little bit how that is.
Okay, Brandy, you may have to help me just a little bit because you've practiced with it more than I have. But in Infinite Campus, once you get into the special ed component of Infinite Campus and go to special ed documents, now across the top, if your district has enabled your rights, you have what's called goal monitoring. And with a couple of clicks, you can pull all of the goals in that are on that child's IEP, and then click and enter data, and then it graphs it for you, and then you write your analysis.
Wow. You can put the interventions in there too. There's a spot where you can click.
Oh my
awesome.
gosh,
And like
that
if
is
you do an instructional change or an intervention, you can just click on there and add it. And then when you graph it, it will add it in on your graph. So
oh,
it's
that
all
is nice.
on one thing. So you're
And
not
it's
having to go back.
And it's what's required, because if you'll remember, we have to show when we make instructional changes. So meaning, you know, if I'm giving that kid a reader and he's meeting his target and he's heading toward that aim line that I have for him, that I'm going to withdraw my reading to see how he does on his own. So that's an instructional change I made. And then that measure after that will show what happened after I made that change and whether it was successful or not. And so that's been the thing we've not been able to do on Infinite Campus prior to them doing the goal monitoring tool that's been so helpful.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the most frustrating things for me as a teacher is having to, well, first of all, having to find something or develop something that meets that criteria, number one. And then, you know, we knew that we had to graph it, and then trying to come up with something that's going to either graph it for you or print out and try to draw it out. And
It's really
We've been
it's
drawing
awesome.
the instructional changes in ourselves until this happened.
Yeah,
And so
that's
we're
awesome.
excited.
Yeah, and then like having to, and then you'd have to copy and paste your goals even, because, you know, if you're using a Word document to do that, I'm going to steal Vonda's word. It's a game changer for sure.
It is. And if anybody needs training on that, we provided Dion with a video of Ashley Mullins explaining how to do that.
Oh, okay.
So it's on your Holler website.
Awesome. We'll
Or it will be one
to
of
link
those.
it right to this podcast too.
Oh my gosh, we will. We will link that to this podcast when
Yeah.
we get that up.
It's
That's
a very
perfect.
useful. She has a PowerPoint and walks you through how to do it.
That's
And so-
great.
Right. Yes, we would. And honestly, that could be linked to all of them, not just the literacy, but the math.
Oh, yeah.
the
Sure,
behavior.
yeah,
I
we'll
mean,
go
'cause
back and
it's
link it
not-
to all of them, sure.
We will definitely do that. That's phenomenal.
Yes.
Well, I'm excited.
Now that you don't do it anymore.
Yeah, I can't be
Now,
excited,
yeah.
Kata.
Something that used to take me like days to do, now I can do in one day.
That's awesome.
Wow, that
one
is
afternoon.
awesome.
It cuts the time in half.
I mean,
And then uploading it
Your
to the
stuff is already there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Then you had to go, and then you have to save it to your desktop, then upload it to. Oh my gosh,
Not like that no more.
that's awesome.
That is great.
Infinite Campus has really done a good job of upgrading it to meet our needs.
That's good that they can listen to you and take those
That's why the
suggestions.
CGIC committee is so important.
So, okay, let's talk about the accommodations. So, for example, I know one of the things that teachers have difficulty with, and it's something that you have to think about every single time. And then when you're having to explain to teachers, so for example, if the child qualifies with reading comprehension, sometimes they want to give a child a reader. And so if you guys don't care, talk about how that is so important to match that skill, that disability to the appropriate accommodation.
Okay, so you have to do a really good job in your PLEP of describing the exact weaknesses that child has based on your data. Okay, that's starting point. We have to talk about the data and whether they've grown or whether they've regressed in that data. You know, we can't just talk about test scores. We've got to talk about daily work with that child and how they're doing. Okay. And so once we focus on what their disability is, we're limited in what can be provided as an accommodation. So there are 3 areas of reading. The only area that I can have a reader in is basic reading. If I have a weakness in basic reading, then I can have a reader. If I have a weakness in reading fluency, a good accommodation that's acceptable would be extended time. I may need a longer period of time so that I can repeat what I'm reading to get better at my fluency. If I have a reading comprehension issue that I have a deficit in, then I need paraphrasing. Unfortunately, on the test, you can only paraphrase the directions.
Mm-hmm.
But every day in your instruction, you know what you need to do to help a kid, right? But you cannot do it on the assessment, the state assessment. Now, do I agree with that? Nope, I don't. I'm never going to agree with it, and I don't care who you are. You can show it to the president. I don't agree with it. But we have to follow the law. We can't break the law.
Right.
If you have a kid, though, that has a deficit in reading comprehension and can justify it in the PLEP and a reading fluency and a basic reading, if you can justify it in your PLEP and write goals for it because of weaknesses that are identified and proven, then you can justify the accommodation. Otherwise, you can't. For instance, in math, if I have a weakness in math calculation, I can have a calculator. But math reasoning, I cannot.
Yeah.
That's the biggies, right?
Yeah.
That's what everybody, I mean, there's a
And
document.
they'll argue.
Oh, yeah.
Until a cow won't come
Yeah.
home,
Yeah.
you know? And there's no specific, you know, what I hate is if I score 70 or below, it's never questioned. That's a weakness.
Mhm.
It would qualify in the MMD or FMD range. Nobody's ever gonna question that.
Right.
But we always have those borderline kids that fall in the 70s. And they struggle just as much, if not more so, than some of those other kids. And all I would say is, you got to follow the guidelines. You got to be able to justify that weakness in the PLEP and justify it with a goal and benchmarks. If you can't do those things, they can't have that accommodation. It's simple.
Yeah.
It don't feel good, but it's simple.
Right, and that's the thing too, because it's in, you know, those type of mistakes. It's really because you do have that heart and you see them struggle. But one thing I used to tell people, like, just because you would have, you know, as a special education teacher, Brandy, you know this, you would have people, other teachers and instructional assistants in your buildings, like, what can I do if they don't have a reader? You know, what can I do? So one of the things I tell the people that ask me is, well, they have extended time, so take them to a place, let them read out loud to you. And then that way, you know, because that way, A, you know, they're reading it, and B, you know, you're not, because you don't want to get them in a habit of being read to and then not be able to do that. So,
The other big thing that they struggle with is we're so much towards the text reader things on the computer. And a lot of my kids, they say, well, it either goes too fast, or I don't understand their tone, or when it reads it, it doesn't read it with the same emotion that a human person would read it with. And so it's harder for them to pick up on things in it. So that's kind of been an issue too, but I've been trying to encourage them more to use that kind of stuff because we're going more and more towards that.
exactly. That's a very good
That's what
point.
the big frustration was for us last week, is when we found out that, you know, whatever you chose under reader was all they could have. But last year we trained it that if you were fading an accommodation, meaning I was moving away from an accommodation and going towards another accommodation, like fading from a human reader and going to a text reader, then you were okay to have both of them on the IEP. But for testing purposes, for K-Prep, the law's been laid. We can only use what was checked under reader. We can't use human if it wasn't checked under reader. If it was under other, as how we were fading it out, it's legal, but we can't use it on test. And that's what's frustrating about it. The line is drawn and then the line moves.
Yeah, that is frustrating.
And it's like Brandy said, though, I think the thing is, and you too, we don't want to practice accommodations they can't have on the test. So we need to be realistic and make sure we're practicing what's on their IEP with them so that it's not a surprise on the day of testing.
Yeah.
And since they've been virtual most of this year, a lot of them have been using that sort of thing anyway.
So kind of goes like you know, until you're forced to use it. So since Brandy, like you mentioned before, you know, this is where it's leading to, and then maybe them having been forced to do it, whether they liked it or not, it maybe, you know, that will help them be used to it when you have to go to that. So
Yeah.
I ran our numbers on Friday, and I would venture to say 70% of our IEPs this year have text reader on it instead of human reader.
And I
And
tell you,
so-
and you know, we know that's been coming, and I know as a classroom teacher, I fought it tooth and nail because I did not want my kid to have a text reader. I wanted a human to read it to my babies. But I mean, but you know, kids adjust better than adults.
Yes, they do.
And
I have some that have done fantastic with it. I have some that have not done very well at all. But the ones who really, really, really have got in there and dug in and wanted to do it have done pretty well with it.
good.
They may have to watch it 10 times.
Yeah.
But
Well,
they're
and that's
getting in there
okay.
and doing it.
That's
So,
okay.
And that's teaching them a skill they can use the rest of their life.
Exactly.
True.
Exactly. You're not always going to have that human there to read.
Exactly.
And so that is very, I mean, it's better for the kid. It's just you know, it's us.
more than
We're not wanting to give it up.
Exactly. So I guess we've kind of covered everything. So really, before we leave, just some final thoughts or final advice that you would give to other teachers.
Randy, go first.
My biggest thing to me, and especially in like working in a special ed department, because our departments are smaller, you know, in general than other departments, is to find somebody that is in a similar type position that you can kind of bounce ideas off of, maybe have them go in and look at things, have them double check over things, because sometimes you look over things, you miss things. And so if they do that, then you're less likely to have, you know, little mistakes here and there, have them look at the goals. I know I get phone calls probably 2 or 3 times a week from another special ed teacher, and she asks me what I think. She'll say, what do you think about this goal for this kid and that goal? So that would be my advice, would be to try to reach out, you know, to other special ed teachers and talk about it and that sort of thing. We're really lucky in Letcher County that we have 2 people other than Regina to holler at if we have questions about that sort of thing. But it's nice to have somebody in your building too.
Right.
You know, that you can kind of talk to and that sort of thing. I know earlier when she called me, she had a question about, you know, which of these goals do you think would fit best? And so we kind of talked about his scores and kind of talked about what he's done so far. And this is a kid, you know, that's been virtual, and this was his first day back in person. So we're kind of talking about that. So that'd be my biggest thing, is not to be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
That's very good advice.
It's all the time changing, and you're all the time having to relearn things.
Yes.
And so,
Absolutely.
No matter what age you are, you
mhm.
need somebody that you can ask questions to. You know,
Yeah.
I've been doing this 32 years, and I still ask questions of people.
And you have to be able to take a little bit of criticism too,
Yes,
and not take it personally.
absolutely.
When they do that, when they go in and say, hey, you know, you probably should change this to this, or you know, that sort of thing, and not take it like they're saying you don't know what you're doing or something like that. That's the biggest thing too, is you have to, because it has to be right. And sometimes I miss stuff.
Right.
So, you know, that's
Yeah.
another thing too.
Yeah, that is very
And
good.
I would echo what she said, and I would add a couple of things. Number one, you're going to make mistakes.
Mhm.
None of us are perfect. Be willing to learn from those mistakes. Even KDE understands that you make mistakes. And that's, you know, everybody's here to help. And you can't help if you don't ask. The dumbest question is the one you don't ask. And then secondly, I would say develop a time management strategy.
Oh, yeah.
The thing that I deal with the most at my level is people that don't manage their time well. And then they're those last minute people that come to everything late, wait to the last minute, and then they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And they're frustrated. And so, You know, I talk people off a cliff on a daily basis in my office because there are people in this world that don't do things ahead of time. And so get you a planner, do it on your phone or do paper, whatever you like to do, but plan far enough out that you're not rushed to do stuff. And if you're not rushed, you don't make as many mistakes.
And you don't drown in the paperwork. A lot of people are like, oh, I wouldn't want to, the special ed part of it, I wouldn't want to do, not because of the kids, because of the paperwork, but you don't drown in it as much if you plan ahead. So that's why I try to go in and create things
Good point.
well in advance and do a little piece at a time. So that way it's not so overwhelming when you have 8 meetings in a day or
Yeah, and that is common. I mean, that does happen. And,
yeah, but you have to do it that way, especially with the transition stuff. There's no other way that you could do it than have them back to back.
but those are some wise words, ladies. That's very, very sound advice for sure.
I agree.
Well, we want to thank you, ladies. Just you hang on here just a second. So we want to thank you guys for joining us for this week's session of an exceptional education playbook. I've quit saying that title sometimes because I always get tangled up on that.
It's a mouthful.
It is. I'm so excited that we learned about all those tools. I love the EdPuzzle. Is that EdPuzzle? And you all had some really sound advice on how to make those goals and those accommodations. So I love that. For deeper understanding and resources, you can join our Literacy Google Classroom, and the class code is XLZLGGS. Type that code in, and there's some resources there. There'll be some samples, and it has resources for all of our podcasts in the past. You can email me at chasity.craft@theholler.org. And we also have a Facebook page and Instagram page. We encourage you to like and share. It's KVEC Exceptional Children on Facebook, and the Instagram is KVEC EC. You can also visit our website at theholler.org under the Special Education tab. And we hope you can join us next month in April. April is our last month of the year that we will be doing these until we'll come back next year. But we're going to be talking about specially designed instruction. So we hope you guys can join us. So until next time, we'll holler at you later.